This is One on One. We're joined by Mark Bonamo, editor of Newark-Inc.com. Good to have you with us, Mark.
Great to be here, thanks.
Mark, describe what this site is.
Newark-Inc.com is an effort started by two former Star-Ledger journalists in late 2014, Bruno Tedeschi and Jonathan Jaffe. They were essentially frustrated by the idea that Newark is on the rise, Newark is coming back, there's a lot of economic opportunity and development. However, no media outlet is really covering the story of Newark anymore. What we're trying to do at Newark Inc., and they brought me in to do, was to tell the story of Newark's moving forward, story by story, day by day. Business, politics, arts, education, all together, all intertwined. Together, Newark moving forward.
It's interesting. You have a background, one of the most impressive political reporters in the state. You covered for Politicker.
Correct.
The Newark mayor's race.
Yes.
And we just in that chair, I told you just a few hours ago, Ras Baraka was sitting there,
Mm-hmm.
the mayor of Newark. How significant has his tenure been so far?
I think his tenure is significant in the fact that one of the themes of the 2014 Newark mayoral election was, look at Ras Baraka's background. He's the son of Leroy Jones, AKA Amiri Baraka, radical poet and playwright. So they expected that the son would be exactly like the father. Now the son is proud to be his father's son.
Very.
But, Howard University educated, very bright, a principal at Central High School for 20 years. He came out of the tradition of his father and his mother, who are both very important to him, but at the same time, he's his own man. And I think he has demonstrated as mayor of Newark that he knows what he needs to do at a time when the state isn't going to help Newark particularly well. He's reaching out to the business community. He's reaching out to all communities. I live in the Ironbound, and I don't think Ras Baraka had a lot of voters in the Ironbound, but my neighbors are saying, hey, listen, we can't say anything else. He's doing a pretty good job. He's not ignoring us.
The major issues in the city, number one, crime?
Crime and education.
Break down the crime issue first. Are we talking violent crime mostly connected to drugs and gangs?
I would think so. I would think that in some ways, the reports you hear out of the South Ward, it's about territory. It's about, you've got one gang over here that's selling drugs on this corner, another gang over here selling drugs on this corner, and never the two should meet, and they fight. And therefore, the level of violence, because of the level of money that is being made, is often astronomical and horrible and frightening. At the same time, that is also, of course, tied to gun violence. They're not fighting with their hands. They're not even fighting with knives or baseball bats. It's guns, and leads to a whole other question about why there are so many guns in our cities.
What position does it put the police in?
A tricky one, because I know many Newark policemen, many of them are my neighbors. They want to fight the war on crime. They need help.
Well, hold on one second. Do you feel to some extent, and the mayor talked about this,
sure,
that the civilian review board right now, in which certain incidents that take place between the police and citizens now are reviewed by civilians, by citizens. Do you feel to some extent the cops feel that they are under a microscope to the degree that they cannot do their job?
I think that's certainly been a worry in the past, but at the same time, by having this review, you won't see what happens. One of the great worries that people have about Newark, oh, it's just going to be like 1967. Part of the problem.
You mean the riots?
Exactly. Riots or rebellion, depending on who you talk to.
Right.
You won't see the same problems with the police you had in 1967 if you have a review board. You won't see the same problems you've had in places like Baltimore and Cleveland and even Staten Island if you have that type of review board in place. It actually could cement the relationship between the community and the police rather than divide them further, and therefore help the police to do their job better.
Education. 1995, the state took over the Newark Public Schools.
Right.
Ras Baraka sat here and said that he and Governor Christie, while they don't agree on very much, they have agreed on the fact that the city needs to take over the public schools again, even though Chris Cerf, who will be there sitting in that chair in a few minutes, who is coming in as the superintendent after Cammie Anderson, former state head of education, Chris Cerf, now coming in to run the Newark Public Schools. Bottom line is Newark ultimately will control again the public schools.
Sure.
Is that a good thing?
It all depends on how they manage it once they get in. there's been this constant drive for local control, and I can see the reasons why. People want to control their own destiny. Why wouldn't they want to control the educational destiny of their children? And, Mr. Cerf, he's getting into the hot seat in terms of this. Cammie Anderson, his predecessor, was highly controversial. Now Mr. Cerf has to come in. But going forward, local control is critical. But at the same time, you only hope that, again, with Ross Barack in place, who was an educator himself, that the same mistakes that led to the state having to come in '95 do not get repeated. I can only hope not.
Mark, let me ask you this. You talked about the fact that your site has been created because the mainstream media really hasn't done a very good job covering Newark. Why do you think that is?
That's a very good question. I think part of it is the daily paper that had been here for decades no longer has its offices.
You're talking about the Star-Ledger.
I am. It's not really the Newark Star-Ledger anymore. It's the Woodbridge Star-Ledger, or wherever they have the office park where that media entity is now located. It's like the Dodgers leaving Brooklyn.
Is that really the right analogy? That the Dodgers were Brooklyn. The Star-Ledger was housed in Newark, but was a statewide newspaper.
That's true, but at the same time, there used to be far more coverage of what took place in Newark, both in City Hall. Now it seems that a lot of the coverage, and again, I know people who work at the Star-Ledger, I respect them.
And full disclosure, we have a relationship, a cross-promotional relationship with the Ledger, so I need to say that publicly.
Exactly.
Go ahead.
But at the same time, a lot of the coverage you see in that newspaper now is solely about crime. And there's far many more stories to be told in Newark. Even the story of, yes, there is, unfortunately, you'll see sometime, particularly this summer, a body count. But why did that happen? What is the meaning behind
Context?
this? Yes, there needs to be context. There needs to be more deeper understanding. This is a challenge to all newspapers everywhere. Investigative reporting is in trouble. We want to go deeper. We want to tell the story of Newark better.
Your site will go deeper?
Absolutely. We want to tell the story of Newark better, and in a more deeper way and with more context.
And real quick, before I let you out of here, engaging people. How can people engage through the site?
Well, there's social media. There's Twitter. There's Facebook. We're trying definitely to do this through social media. Also, it's important to be visible. I live here. I care about this city. I will engage anyone, anytime, as the public face of this website, because it's too important what's happening now for Newark. Newark has a future, and people need to know Newark has a future.
And finally, I'm not going to say bullish, confident?
Yes, I am. Quietly confident, because I see what people are going through every day in the streets. I know what they feel, I know what they hear, and they know Newark's coming back.
Mark, we wish you nothing but the best.
Thank you very
and
much.
your colleagues over at Newark-Inc.com, and
Thank you.
As a media partner, we'll continue to try to tell the story together. Thank you,
very
buddy.
much. Thank you for your time,
Stay
sir.
right there. You
Thank
got
you.
it.
One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation, celebrating over 25 years of broadcast excellence. Funding for this special edition of One-on-One with Steve Adubato at NJIT has been provided by NJIT, the Fidelco Group, Barnabas Health, Prudential Financial's Global Communications Department, TD Bank, Verizon Communications, and by PSE&G. Transportation provided by Airbrook Limousine, serving the metropolitan New York, New Jersey area. One-on-One with Steve Adubato at NJIT has been produced in cooperation with FiOS One News.